Thanks for coming out. Thanks to John for hosting all these events so that folks can meet these crazy candidates who are out here working really hard to get your vote and your support. I'm running for City Council at large as a Democrat. There are 17 members of City Council, 10 are elected in districts. I am running, and 7 are elected citywide. I am running for one of those positions. No party is allowed to hold more than 5 seats at large. So that's why we have 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans right now. I think the most important question to answer is, why did I get in this race? And I'm gonna ask a question. You can raise your hand, smile, nod, however you feel comfortable answering it. But how many of you in this room have helped someone or know someone dealing with mental illness, substance use disorder, addiction, or alcoholism? So I am running citywide, and I can tell you that you're not alone. Everyone is really feeling the weight of these issues on their families, and you're not alone with me. I found out 7 years ago that my husband is an addict and alcoholic, and I never knew. And I never knew for a lot of reasons. I didn't know because I didn't want to see it. I didn't know because I was trying to create this perfect life and this perfect world and bubble that me and my family could live in. I was really busy during that time, finishing grad school up at Penn, getting my career launched, getting married, having 2 kids in just 18 months. I thought that I could just line it all up perfectly and do everything right and my life would be perfect. But I found out just how imperfect life really is for everyone, and I was certainly no different. I am really lucky, and my husband is really lucky. He's in recovery now. But I'm really lucky for a couple of reasons and very privileged. Because the day I found out he was an addict and alcoholic, he got a bed space at a rehab facility. I'm really lucky and blessed because when my city insurance didn't cover the cost of that rehab, we had family support to help pay for it. And I'm really lucky and privileged because his rehab facility included care for me and my family, so that I could learn how my life had been impacted over time, and how we could recover as a family and get back on track. I am running because this city needs our help. There are a lot of people just like me, just like my husband, and folks who have issues of mental illness, and we need to do a better job of supporting them. I see a city as I'm running for office that needs more investment in social workers and caseworkers and therapists and counselors. And I know that we can help more people and do a better job because that's what I've done my whole career. I've spent my entire career fixing problems in cities. I did it first for the city of Philadelphia. I worked as a deputy managing director and built programs like Philly 311 with my friend Jeff Friedman, who's here, and Philly Stat. And those programs work together to make city government more accessible and more transparent in what we were doing, because everyone pays taxes and deserves to get the services. So rather than having to know somebody to fill a pothole, you just call 311. If you have a question or a concern about an issue in your neighborhood, you should be able to call 311. And on the back end, we should be asking ourselves, what are all these people calling about, and how can we do things differently so they don't need to call in the first place? And that's where I spent the majority of my career. I later went and worked as a national consultant, working with cities across the country to get on better financial footing. I helped build long-term financial plans for places like Compton, California, Providence, Rhode Island, and right up the street in Reading, Pennsylvania, one of the poorest cities in America. Helping them work through their finances and their operations to figure out how we could get the best bang for our buck and get programs that work for people. I get how we fix problems. I've spent a career finding money to support programs that work for people and businesses, and I want to bring that skill set to City Council. We all know the challenges we're up against in Philadelphia. We see it, we feel it. We have a 27% poverty rate that doesn't seem to be moving. We have folks dying on our streets in the opioid crisis. We have trash everywhere. We need people who know how to solve these challenges and not just talk about them. With me, you don't get any alligator arms. I'm not doing one of these. If there's an issue in the city and the mayor needs my help, I'm stepping in. I'm coming up with ideas. I'm coming to the table. I'm taking it to the neighborhoods, and we're going to solve these problems together. There's a lot of work to do in City Council. I'll highlight a couple of areas I in particular want to focus on. First and foremost, for me, like I said, I'm here because I got into a recovery treatment program for me and my family. I want to make sure everybody going through these issues has the same support that I had. So I want to make sure we're funding family treatment programs for those dealing with addiction and alcoholism. Job growth. We are not going to solve our poverty issues unless we grow jobs in this city. We have a lot of work to do to repair our relationship with the business community. I am not going to give away the city, but my first impulse is not going to be to tax somebody or some business without looking internally for those savings. I know that there's money in our city government if we just do the work to find it. We need to focus and get back to basics. A lot of services we all depend on, our police, our fire department, our trash collection systems, and our street maintenance. We can do a better job of providing those services. We can do new and great things here in Philadelphia. But you have to have people who study these issues, who think about these issues, and who have been, frankly, right on the ground working new programs to get things done. We have a trash collection system. I don't know, I've gone all over the city. And between mental illness and substance use disorder and trash, I'm shocked at the number of people who agree that we don't have a good enough system. We are still picking up trash the same way we picked up trash in 1950, 1970, and not much has changed. I want to innovate. I want to bring in technology and new ideas. I helped bring Big Bellies to the city of Philadelphia. It was supposed to just start in Center City. It was a way we could reduce overtime, reduce accidents and injuries for our workers. It was a way we could pick up trash more regularly in high-trafficked areas. But it was supposed to expand. It was supposed to grow. It was supposed to incorporate the neighborhoods. And we haven't done that yet because we haven't been pushing hard enough in City Council. There are new ways of building out trash collection systems that are unimaginable to most Philadelphians. They build underground waste management in other countries, and that's stuff we can have here too. We can have nice things in Philadelphia. We deserve it. But we've got to have folks thinking about 30 years from now because it takes a long time to get there. And that's the kind of skill set and mindset I want to bring to City Council. There is so much work to do. And I have a lot of technical qualifications to do this job, but I really think it is my personal story and my perspective for how we help people holistically and differently that help me to represent you with the kind of care and compassion and energy you deserve in City Council. So I hope that you'll vote for me. I hope that you will work on my behalf, tell your friends, your family, your colleagues that there's somebody here who gets what you all see is out there. And I'm willing to make this my only job. No one else will be paying me to do this job. I will be fighting for you day in and day out, and I will work to make this city better, smarter, faster, and get the results we've all been looking for. So I'm happy to take any questions, but thank you for coming out on your night off and being here with me and taking a listen. So thank you.
So, as odd as this will sound, trash is one of my passions.
It's like we're soulmates.
So, recently Plan Philly did an article about how almost 50% of our recyclables aren't being recycled, they're being incinerated. I think that, when we're thinking about trash, we're thinking at the end of the cycle instead of at the beginning of the cycle. And I know a lot of the litter on our streets is single-use plastic containers. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about single-use plastic containers in our city? Do you think that there's a time and a place that maybe we start to consider whether a ban, or I know you said you weren't a huge fan of increasing taxes, but a tax or some way to wean us off of those products, or at least into things that are more sustainable.
One, I agree with you on trash. I also think there's a lot of talk about street sweeping, and I am absolutely for street sweeping, but it shouldn't be in the streets and on the sidewalks to begin with, right? If we're doing things right, that shouldn't even be the problem. That's just treating the symptom. And to your point, we need to start looking at these things. We've got to sit down and talk with our grocers, our store owners, and get them off of plastic bags. We've got to talk about whether or not a ban could work, what kind of incentives or costs are associated with doing those types of things, because we've all seen the reports about where we will be in 2040 if we don't start getting going on some of these issues. So I believe in hackathons. And bringing great minds together and in being inclusive of all the people impacted and affected. Let's come together and think about some new ideas and how we can get out of using plastics. I am traveling with my water bottle. I try not to buy certain products. I think we can do more to discourage those types of behaviors. But we've got to work together to come up with some new ideas, because I think just taxing it isn't always the best way to get done what you want to get done.
It's really cool to sort of ask questions to candidates and see what their views are. But I'm new to Philly, so
welcome. We're so
you.
glad you chose Philadelphia as your home.
Yes, and
as is John.
But everyone I know told me not to move here. Mm-hmm. That it's a dying city, that it's a dirty city, that it's a dangerous city. And I found some of that to be true, some of it to be false. But the biggest myth I've encountered so far is that everyone told me when I moved here that I wouldn't need a car. that
you wouldn't need a car?
I wouldn't need a car. Mm-hmm. That, you can live close enough to SEPTA and take buses and things. But where I live in Port Richmond, that's really not applicable. And I didn't think of it until recently, but most of Philadelphia is not center city. Yeah. It's not as easily accessible by bus. There is no train really or trolley service where I'm at. There's virtually no parking, so I've been struggling as a Southerner to find ways to park these tiny little roads. And the potholes are kind of obscene. Sometimes you'll have construction in the middle of the street, there's no warning. They kind of leave the street kind of broken up and open. You can't even move your car that you parked to go to work. So I've been late many times to my new job because the construction around Port Richmond and Richmond Street is just kind of obscene. Yeah. And so it sounds like there's a lot of ideas that have already been floated and a lot of policy solutions that people are already discussing, but it seems like they've been discussing it for a while. So I guess as a new resident, and hearing your plans to sort of, bring, fresh ideas to the council, mm-hmm. What are your plans to sort of bring the resolve to the council as well, so that people are discussing policies but are also implementing them as well?
And listen, I have no explanation as to why government is something I've always wanted to do, but I don't remember a time when I didn't want to do this. But what I love most about government and governing is performance management. And this is why Philly Stat and Philly 311 were built. When you talk about road quality, one of the things we used to talk about in meetings regularly on a monthly basis was talking about all the calls that were coming in for potholes, how we categorize them and how we fill them. And then how do we use different materials to pave streets in the future? How do we prioritize which streets we pave? How do we think about development in the future and where that's happening? Because as you know, wherever you have massive new amounts of development, you have street cuts, right? And so you could pave a street and then a week later, a new house is being constructed and they've dug up the road. And there's nothing more infuriating from a planning perspective to see your new road dug up. So it's about being more thoughtful and using data to make decisions. City Council has not holistically use that data center to make decisions. So as I think about my role as a citywide candidate and councilwoman, I want to start talking about a performance management system and using that data regularly so that when different departments come before us, I'm asking questions about, well, listen, you've had this many requests come in for this pothole. When are we going to fill it? How did you fill it? And what did you fill it with? And when is the next time the street's going to be paved? That's how we managed the city for results. It started getting better in the last administration, and I think we can keep that energy going, but we've got to have folks in city council who understand where those data points are and how to use it to manage differently. It's not something they've ever done before. They have generally taken a step back when it comes to managing the city, and I'm going 2 feet in. I want to help Mayor Kenny or whoever is elected and make sure that they have the tools that they need and they're thinking about this data and information. What is the point of collecting all of it if we're not going to use it? So I think we can have different conversations if we have data to prove that these are real problems affecting neighborhoods.
Okay, what were your thoughts on the public transit issue?
Oh, sure. One of the things, my friend Jeff is over here. I drive, all over the city because I have 2 kids. They're 7 and 9. So between carpooling and getting from meeting to meeting and different events like this, it's crazy getting around. And public transit is really difficult to use when you have kids and a million things to get to. I can tell you, as I have gone to new parts of the city that I otherwise probably wouldn't have gone to just because I have 2 kids and my daily life is in my bubble like everybody else. We are really, really missing an opportunity to help bridge gaps in the city. I spent a good deal of time driving to the Northeast, and I see a huge land of opportunity, but there's no way to get there. Right? I was just looking at houses and the affordability of some of the houses in the Great Northeast. But if you can't get to and from where you work, that's a real problem and no one's going to want to be there. So I've talked with some of the representatives up there and Joe Honstein about rapid bus lines and how we can get better transit opportunities going in that direction, because there's a lot of land, there's a lot of opportunity, and if we build the infrastructure and the transportation to get there, more people will it'll be more accessible for people to move to. While I believe Center City could maybe handle some more density, I would like to make sure we're using our land where it's available, but we've got to create the right structure for people to get there. Yeah.
What I'm not hearing in a lot of people's campaigns is how they're going to address the gun violence that's proliferating throughout a lot of areas in our communities.
Yeah.
As a big city, we are #1 in gun violence, and nobody has put on the table an effective strategy on how to do that. So what's your strategy?
A couple things in there. One, our shootings and homicides are up, and they have always been high. And one of the things I would like to see us do is focus on gun violence and crime using data and information. So New York just came out today talking about some of the work that they're doing. And they're actually focused on getting arrests down as crime goes down, because they are doing more community policing work. They are trying to get in the neighborhoods to figure out what's going on, and they're taking a different approach, which is don't stop and frisk and try to find a reason to arrest somebody, but instead focus on talking with that neighborhood person and finding out what's going on in the neighborhood, what's plaguing that neighborhood, and then coordinating services in that neighborhood, not just police, right? Because when the police come to your door, that's a very different interaction than when somebody else comes to your door. So starting to gain information from the neighbors in the neighborhoods differently. Something else that came out of New York City is CompStat. And certainly our police department uses it, but I don't know that they use it to the extent that New York City has, which is how do you follow pockets of crime around the city and hi, thank you for coming. And how do you repurpose your resources to get into those neighborhoods and have a new approach. I don't have all the answers to gun violence. This is something that we've been working on for quite some time in the city. And to your point, we're not getting the right kind of results. So I'd like to bring people together and start talking about moving things forward. But it's got to start with community policing activity, bringing our neighborhoods out and our neighbors out to talk about what's going on and how we can approach this differently, because it's not working and it's getting worse. So CompStat and neighborhood approach, I think, is really important in the discussion. We've also talked about gun buybacks. The more we can discourage people from hanging on to guns that they don't need and incentivizing people to give up their guns is really important. We do them once a year or once every couple of years. I've talked with some organizations about doing this on a more regular basis and crowdfunding How do we get, the whole city of Philadelphia behind this and saying, like, it is worth our money to get these guns off the street. So there's lots of different things that are happening in conversations that are happening. And so I am absolutely trying to get involved in those conversations. But, I'm open to ideas.
Are you familiar with focus deterrence?
Yes, I am a little bit. When I worked in the city, we were starting to get this up and running. And I think they're doing some good. But we've really got to do a better job of connecting the dots, because I think that's where we've sort of missed. We've got to get back in the community and focus a little bit differently. So it's a good start, but I think we're not getting the results, so we've got to readjust.
The FOP's union contract is up in 2020, and it's something that the mayor usually negotiates, but I haven't heard anyone talk about it. And if we're going to address things like gun violence and like equity within our neighborhoods and making sure that the police are also being held accountable, have you looked at anything related to the FOP contract at all, or have you familiarized yourself with that? I've heard kind of like a deafening silence from every candidate when it comes to it, and it's a huge thing. The election of Larry Krasner was fantastic for criminal justice reform, but we need to make sure that the police are working hand in hand with the district attorney's office. And do you have any plan to talk about the FOP contract as it's coming up and making that an issue? Our city tends to be quiet. Like the last one kind of just like skirted by and no one said anything, and I was like, where is everyone? Like, this is a major thing where we could get a lot of concessions from the police in the city to actually be doing good community work in order to help reduce crime.
I have been involved in labor negotiations on the behalf of the city and with cities and states as a consultant, doing economic analysis around how much it costs to have these contracts in place. There are ways to get new things in contracts that you want to see, but you have to prioritize it. So I'm not sure what this mayor is prioritizing as part of the arbitration process, but I hope that and I encourage this mayor to really focus on training for our police officers. I don't think we have enough trauma-informed police officers. I can tell you another member of mine who was caught up in the heroin epidemic and is in recovery now. We couldn't find her for a number of weeks, and it was terrifying. And we went to the police department, and they had no way of talking to us in a manner that felt like they understood what we were going through and that they were there to help. And I think that's a lot of the experience people have. And it's really scary to feel that vulnerable when you walk into a police district and not feel welcomed. And I'm certainly not the first person to feel that way. But I would like that experience to be different. So as we talk about the FOP contract, I want to talk about investing in training. And what that means for the people who are interacting with them on the streets. Something that's really concerning is the requirements to be a police officer. I'm not sure what the commissioner or the city has changed or moved, but I know at one point they were talking about lowering the age after previous commissioner Chuck Ramsey had increased the age to 21, having some college credits or work experience or veterans experience. I think we need people who know a little bit more about life than an 18-year-old coming out of high school. So I want to make sure that we are maintaining high levels of qualifications if we're going to have these folks carry a gun and handle kind of our criminal defense system out in the streets. So I will definitely be watching it. I know a lot about labor contracts. I've helped negotiate some of them. And I will be focused on making sure training is a big part of what they have to go through. But always happy to have new ideas and try to get some new things into the contracts that work better for people. So I will absolutely be talking to Larry Krasner if I'm elected.
Do you support subway expansion to the Navy Yard?
I would love to support that. I think it is, I worked at PIDC as an intern when we were talking about expanding the Navy Yard and how we were going to grow that. And one of the greatest difficulties was, how is everybody going to get there? And so we explored increasing or growing the transit line that way. The costs were just exorbitant, and if we can find the infrastructure money to do that, I would absolutely love to. We've built a great campus down there using a lot of tax incentives to get folks down there. The last sort of missing link is making sure people have a way to get there. So yeah, and there's still room to grow down there, which is kind of the best part.
One policy that people often bring up is legalizing marijuana and then taxing it and then using the revenue for it for whatever social program or service. And I know that there's some talk in the Capitol about this, but in terms of the city, one, do you support marijuana legalization? And then two, do you also support the expunging the records of those who've, gone through the prison system because of nonviolent offenses and carrying marijuana and so forth, even though now the conversation is moving towards legalizing and everyone benefiting? How do you plan to bring in those who were unjustly a victim of its criminalization and bring them into the conversation?
Yeah, so most of this is state controlled on the usage. I think this has been long in coming. I am for the legalization of marijuana. I want to see it used in especially the cases of epilepsy and some of the other things that it's been proven to really help folks. That being said, coming from a background of recovery, I sort of am in this proceed with caution mode, where I believe in legalization, but we need to make sure we are being very careful about educating our public and our children, because there's a lot of research around drug usage and marijuana usage before the age of 25 and the effects on your brain. So if we aren't careful, we will make this sort of, we will go down the same path we had with alcohol, where we haven't educated families on the damages and the signs and problems associated with these things. So I just want to make sure that we're educating the population before we just sort of say, here you go, have at it. Yes, absolutely. Generally, if somebody has been jailed for usage of marijuana, I could say, sure, we should look at expungement. Not every case is that simple. And so I think it will take a good look. We'll have to take a look at some of the cases and the folks that are in there. But yeah, generally, if we have legalized marijuana usage and somebody is sitting in jail for using marijuana, I think we're sort of, creating the wrong dynamic. So absolutely, we'll take a look. But from a city policy on taxes and services, I'm not sure a lot of that money will come our way, but probably more likely a pass through the state government into Philadelphia. So I'm going to fight to get that money back as best I can. But, that comes with, and sort of that leads me to the point of, we need to make sure, as we are asking Harrisburg for more money, and our quote unquote fair share, we have to really make sure our budget is tight here, right? We have to be as efficient and effective as we possibly can, because no one in Harrisburg or Pittsburgh or the middle of this state wants to see us get more money. So we're going to have to make a really good business case for why we should be getting more. And that's going to take some real discipline fiscally here in Philadelphia to make sure we are as lean and mean as we possibly can be. So just wanted to be on the record as saying we've really got to clean up shop a little bit before we go asking for more.
Eryn, what's your plan to bring more resources to our schools?
Yeah.
In particular, I know one thing that you're focused on is mental health services. Mm-hmm. I've always worked in Southwest Philadelphia as an educator, always in schools with a very high poverty rate, and almost none of the schools I've ever worked in has had school counselors.
Yeah.
The gun violence, the high poverty rates, the opioid epidemic, it's all having a very traumatic effect on our children. And I know it takes a lot of time away from educators' teaching days, dealing with these traumas that our young people are experiencing. So I think that's definitely an immediate need that needs to be addressed. But overall, our schools are lacking in resources. So,
yeah. I think, well, one, any savings we can find in city government, I think needs to go first and foremost towards education. And I believe in public schools, and I know that they can change the trajectory of our future if we invest in them, right? Every Democrat in this race, I think, believes that. It's how are you going to do something different? So I'm going to talk a little bit about service in lieu of taxes. Because while I would love to see payments in lieu of taxes from our universities and some of our nonprofit institutions, we haven't gotten anywhere. So let's start talking about services. We have a lot of great schools that help train a lot of people in this city. Could we get them to help feed our schools, counselors, psychologists? Can we build a program to make sure that we are getting as many volunteers into our school system as we can? Folks have hours and folks want to help. I will tell you, I was very, not to go too far off the road here, but I was really depressed by the election in 2016 too. But I thought I was living in this world where nobody was doing anything, and how could this possibly happen? Now that I'm running, I'm telling you, there are people from the Northeast to the South and West and East who are leaning in and trying to help make a difference in their community. I actually think there are a great number of people, especially in the counseling and social work and psychology world, that would be willing to help step in and provide some of the services our kids need. Our teachers need training. Talk about trauma-informed. There are big pushes now for trauma-informed schools. We're going to have to help our teachers. We're going to have to help invest in our teachers. So I want to see us get to the training programs that I know that they need. I want to flood our schools with counselors. I am lucky my son and my daughter have a feelings teacher at their school, and I never knew what that was. But so much of what kids have to learn and how they grow is understanding their feelings and their emotions and how that relates to somebody else. Which is where there's a lot of conflict in their lives, their parents, their teacher, even between their teachers, right, at school. They have a feelings teacher at their school, and that's part of their lessons. They sit down and talk about how did you manage conflict, what happens when somebody treats you poorly, how did you handle it, what could you say back. My daughter came off a school bus once. She's like, oh, she came in crying. Oh, Mom, like, blah, blah, blah. So-and-so was so mean to me on the bus. She yelled at me and yada, yada. I'm always like, the worst things happen on the bus. But she comes in and I was like, well, is there anything you said? Is there anything maybe, you did that you want to talk about? And she said, I actually think that I heard her say she was really hungry. And maybe she was just really hungry and she took it out on me. And I thought, oh my God, here's a kid who is not taking on somebody else's aggression and somebody who's realizing with enough emotional intelligence to say, maybe it wasn't me, maybe this person is just having a bad moment or a bad day, and I'm gonna go ahead and forgive her and just like let that one go. And then I found out that had been something that they talked about in class with the feelings teacher. You have a science teacher when you have a science question. You have a math teacher when you have a math question. Our kids have a lot of feelings and a lot of feelings issues. They need some place to go. I believe in feelings teachers. I believe in counselors and caseworkers and helping these families holistically. I want to see us take a different approach. So I believe in social and emotional learning programs and curriculums, and I want them to be in our schools.
I like your attitude, what you just said about especially the feelings and stuff like that. I can relate to what she said. I've been there. I don't believe in nobody should abuse nobody. That's wrong. I feel as though that a child or anyone, I don't care if it's a child, adult, especially a child, they should be able to talk to a close teacher or someone they trust, and they should believe them. I've been through that in my 8th grade coming out of junior high school. And I tell, and now it's worse. It's worse than we living in the times today as it is. And I encourage everyone that's going through it now, tell somebody that you know and trust. You shouldn't have to go through that alone. I don't care if you got a counselor or close city council that you can talk to. they should be able to help you with that. No one should ignore that from you. You should be able to receive that help.
Yeah.
That's my support in that. No one should be able to be abused, teased, or bullied. I'm a big against that. I don't believe in that.
Yeah. But I think, to your point, having a feelings teacher, somebody that is directly supposed to be responsible for helping you with your feelings, makes it easier for a child to know who to go to. And that's why I think it's really important to invest in our schools a little bit differently. And oh, by the way, it's something we haven't tried yet. I think we haven't tried really investing in counselors in this kind of social aspect of our kids' learning. So I want to see us try differently. Our teachers are working really hard at helping these kids day in and day out, and they're pounded just as hard as our kids and our families are. We've got to all kind of lift us all up and get us to a better place together. So
Philadelphia is one of those, this is like a policy wonky term, majority cities where more than half the population is non-white. And I think that lends itself as to one of the primary reasons for all the inequity in the city. The disparity in terms of class, disparity in terms of social service delivery, and so forth. And children growing up in a city that has such embedded inequity, of course that lends itself to how they see themselves, what their opportunities are, and so forth. I went to a meeting recently. People were talking about the candidates' race and things, and they felt like they wanted someone who was one of them in council necessarily, because they felt like those are the only people who really can see and respect their perspective on their experiences in Philadelphia and what that means for them as a person of color. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question then to surmise is, how do you see yourself, if elected, addressing the racial bias that is clearly present in Philadelphia that lends itself to the policies that aren't necessarily benefiting Philadelphia as a whole?
I think by investing in our neighborhoods a little bit differently and working with our communities on their needs more directly, we can start to attack that a little bit. There is a long history in this city and in this country for discriminatory practices, everything from how we housed people to how we gave them accessibility to jobs. This has been so many generations of discrimination and trauma. And so unraveling that is going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of trust, and that takes time to build. So all I can say is I will be in every neighborhood talking about what we're doing and what we're not doing. When I worked in Philly Stat, one of the things we did was start mapping inequality. When you start talking about where there are problems in the city and where we're investing our money and our resources, and that's people resources, that's money resources, that's time resources, we start to we found out we're spending a lot of time on Center City and not a lot of time outside of Center City. And that's not surprising, I'm sure, to most people in this room. But we have got to do a better job of displaying that and being honest about it. Because if we're going to change it, we've got to put it in people's faces and say this isn't good enough.
When I say majority minority, it's that I guess there is a perception that the non-white members of the city are not equal contributors to the city's economy, and that oftentimes in conversation around policy, people see issues surrounding people of color as a problem to be fixed, as opposed to a resource that is already present and currently contributing. Yeah. So I guess my question is, how do you see yourself as, if elected, addressing that issue of disparity, that the Asian American population, the African American population, Latino, they're all contributing to the economy, they're all paying taxes. Absolutely. They're not necessarily criminals or someone that has to be fixed, because I think that narrative lends itself to why Philadelphia has had such blight, because they see it as there's no resource here unless you move the current occupants of certain neighborhoods out through gentrification and so forth, and then replace them with young white millennials, essentially, because they're the ones who really help and invest.
So when we bring people together to talk about policies, it's who you choose to bring to the table. And who I will choose are people from the African American Chamber of Commerce, people from the Asian American organizations in the city. We have so many great bones here and so many people who have joined CDCs and different entities. We've got to bring them to the table. They live in the neighborhood. They know better what's going on there. They know what's going on in their business community. We have a huge small business ecosystem here in Philadelphia, and a lot of them are driven and owned by our minorities in this city. And so bringing them to the table to talk about job growth is really important, right? Because you're talking about homegrown businesses and growing them differently. We can talk about Amazon coming here and how great maybe that would have been, but what would be more great, thank you, what would be more great is if we supported the businesses that were already here and got them to the next level. So that's how I see convening folks and talking about how do we make your business work better for you, and how can the city support you in growing it. Because if you started a business here and you grew up here, you're more likely to invest your money here. And so that's the focus I'll take as we talk about growing the economy and bringing people together.
Thank you.
But it's who you choose to bring to the table that matters.
As far as SEPTA goes, so we've talked about how SEPTA isn't necessarily where it should be, and there's been the talk of expanding the Broad Street line, which is a lot of money for a pretty small chunk of transit. We're the third most used transit network in the country, and we have the smallest percentage of local contribution. Do you support increasing the city's contribution to SEPTA? And if you do support it, where do you think we could find the money to do such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to increase funding for transit. I think I'm going to have to get in there and take a good hard look at what our priorities are and what we need to fix first. So yes, I want to see more transit money. I've talked a little bit about some of the parking issues in the city. I think it is very inexpensive in some areas to have parking on street. I think we need to look at our on-street parking policies and how much it costs. I paid $15, I think, maybe it's $15 to have an on-street parking up in Fairmount. I'm not sure that we're charging people quite right for parking generally. So I would look at on-street parking as a place to start. I would look at some of our other areas that could be opened up for on-street parking. We talked for a hot minute just about the parking around City Hall and the number of spaces you see being used by individual cars for city workers. I can't even remember, 2008, 2009 when we opened up 15th Street. We were, I stumbled upon this problem in city government where a lot of city workers had on-street parking around city government. And there were people from the Rendell administration that were still parking on street for free. And so what we did was take a good hard look at our parking policies for city workers. And we found there were a lot of people who didn't need a car or certainly a parking spot to do their job. So we eliminated that, and we opened all of 15th Street along the Municipal Services Building because if we expect you to come all the way downtown to do city business, we should probably open up some spaces so you could come in our building. Each one of those spaces, I think we calculated, was somewhere around $2,500 per space per month, and that was low. So if you talk about opening up spaces just in and around City Hall area, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So I'll take a good hard look at on-street parking as a place to start.
Awesome. And then my second question, I am a small business owner in Philadelphia, and so
thank you for being here.
It is extremely stressful. Like, I love Philly. It is like the place I want to be. Sometimes I really wonder why I opened a business in the city. Just for all the different programs and like all the different places I need to go to get information. Every time I get sent somewhere, I have to literally, so I had to get a variance on a project. I needed to hand deliver that to the Municipal Services Building. Like every step, it just has to take so much longer and it costs so much money. Like, I wanted to put new signs up in an existing sign, just replacing plastic. I needed to have a $2,000 survey done of the front of the building. Then I needed to get a $350 permit just to put in new graphics. You know, so it's like these are extremely high costs for a small business that is maybe doing $150,000 to $200,000 in revenue, and then you've got the high cost of labor. We're in a good labor market, so it's not cheap to get people to work for you. You know, do you have any ideas about how to maybe streamline some of the things that we have? We have a lot of great resources. It's just, you know, and I think the new website design on phila.gov is great, but still, I call my representative in the Commerce Department, and then I just never hear back, or I get like a one-off email. You know, have you thought about ways that the city can streamline some of those services?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work to do on especially LNI plan review, making sure that we were making it easier for people to submit plans and submit good plans well in advance, so that the city wasn't holding them up. It's a lot of common sense problems we have in city government that we don't get right. And so I think we should continue to build the online platform to make things easier, consolidate forms. I talk to a lot of restaurant and small restaurants, right? You own one restaurant. It can be such a huge burden to get very basic things done. And we can streamline that, right? Once a year or twice a year, you can fill out your health-related forms, or we can sit down and make things easier and more online-based, especially on plan review-related stuff or the signage issues. We get in our own way sometimes, and I think you probably have a lot of good examples of how we get in our way. Certainly, the $2,000 review of the front of your building is probably a waste of time and money. So having some common sense in our city government is something I'll take a good hard look at. Operations is what I love. So if you come to me and tell me you're seeing some sort of problem, I'm going to go try to fix it. That's what I did with this random parking problem. It's what I did when I saw plan review problems. It's what I did when I saw community policing problems. This is what I love and do. So I don't have all of the answers. I don't know every single problem, but I'm going to convene people and we're going to talk about it and we're going to figure it out. The city is really slow to change, but I've changed it. I've seen it. It can happen. You've got to have folks who know how to dig on the inside and who are relentless follow-up type folks. I've had a hard time working through the bureaucracy before, but you just keep beating it down and eventually you get the change you need. We've got to have that kind of tenacity in city council. And so I'll be there and I will be a voice for change nonstop. I mean, and from the business aspect, you know, one of the things we talked about was having a separate 311 system just built for businesses, so that you could create, there's nothing more frustrating than calling city government and leaving a message on a voicemail, not knowing if John is going to pick up the phone and call you back, and not having any accountability for John calling you back. And it's holding up your business. So this is where 311 was supposed to bring some semblance, not you, John.
You said I'm not calling you back, text me.
Some semblance of order, right? And accountability was, if I call the city and I need a form or I need information, you know, what is the customer service standard for number of days you're going to take to call me back? That's something we used to measure and monitor, and we don't do right now, but we need to. So.
There's a lot of business owners who just don't know about things, or like accidentally do something they're not supposed to do,
right.
Or don't know that there's this amazing storefront improvement grant project, you know, like, and like as neighborhood associations, it then falls on us as volunteers to be doing all this legwork. So
you have 17 members of city council. This should be our job, right? Promoting access to the programs we create. I don't know when it became okay to have a homestead exemption and then never tell anybody about it. We have so many programs and safety nets. We need folks pushing the message out into the neighborhoods. We need folks with energy for this stuff, and that's what I have.
If I can circle back around to the parking and be a little bit eclectic in my question.
Okay, you're making me nervous.
Well, I'm going to start on Broad Street first. The parking that happens in the median, and speaking of Center City and Center City,
you're gonna get me in some trouble.
Employee parking, people who are parking, whether it be municipal cars, whether it be police cars, whether it be individual cars, parking on the median in Broad Street. the actual concrete median. And then taking that and bringing it down into South Philly, what is your stance and what are your thoughts on cleaning up the center of Broad Street parking? And with that thought that parking is a premium in South Philly, where are your thoughts on PPA parking lots that are in South Philly in different areas of the city, that a pilot project of a parking garage could be tried to see how it works, and if it fails or if it succeeds, in order to create possibly more parking to alleviate that problem in that area?
Ron, you were talking crazy.
Yes,
People
I
not
am.
parking in the median. I mean, like nothing bothers me more than parking as you drive. Well, maybe trash. Parking around the city and seeing cars in the median. It's unsafe. Those thoroughfares are too busy, especially during particular times of day. I want people off of major medians parking. I know South Philly will be mad at me in some parts, but we've got to get folks into safer parking spaces. We're also damaging cars on the medians, trying to get them in spaces and during rush hour. So I would like to see the city take back the PPA. I think it's time we took back our schools. I don't think we've seen a lot of greatness come out of the state takeover of PPA. So I think it's time that we had it back and we start taking things in our own hands again. I think we've proven that we can and that we're capable. In terms of parking garages, absolutely. I want to get people out of their cars. Like that's a goal, right? Is to have less cars on the street and less congestion over time. But until we get there, we have to find a place to put these vehicles. So parking garages is really the only solution in the short term. In the long term, let's get folks back on public transit and rapid bus lines and underground. But absolutely, let's take a look at it. And every neighborhood's going to be a little bit different. Listen, they park on the median down Spring Garden too. So we're going to have to take a good hard look at what options there are in different neighborhoods. But yeah, the parking's insane. I literally just called Jeff 2 days ago driving down the Parkway and counted the cars who were parked in the median, because when I was there, we had an executive order that I had the mayor sign that no city government worker and nobody was allowed to park in the median along the Parkway. This is one of the most iconic and beautiful scenes when you look from City Hall all the way to the Art Museum. And we have allowed business owners to park there, city government workers to park there, random Joe Schmo parking there. I drove past and saw an Audi just randomly parked there. I mean, this is supposed to be our beautiful streets. I'm going to fight to put planters there so there never needs to be another executive order. There's just literally physical barriers for parking in there. So no more parking on the median on JFK. Or on the Parkway.
It started up again when you left.
I know, it was like the moment I left city government, people started parking up the street again.
Actually, I'm talking Broad Street as well.
Yeah.
It's a walkway.
It's insane. Yeah, SEPTA parks there a lot. I see them from time to time in the police. So it's not okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not going home right away, so anything you didn't want to ask in public.